I've noticed a pattern that seems to affect every human idea.
We know more than ever before, but who knew bias was the bane of all you study? We know more than ever before, but who knew bias was the bane of all you study?
Thought experiment. It seems that every idea, any idea, has a life cycle. It doesn't matter if it's a cultural movement, political movement, religion, or even an intellectual property for entertainment. The human condition seems to impact all of those things in essentially the exact same way. In other words, there's a life cycle for an idea. This is what I mean. Some type of social idea is born. It starts small, and then the truths and or usefulness of this idea usually speaks to only the fringes of society, a minority. Then you get to the adoption stage. Typically, a charismatic leader brings this idea to the masses. This also brings the first real evolution of the idea. See, it's the first time the idea doesn't just speak for itself. Instead, it's the cult of personality that inspires more people. People start following the person and not the message. And the dynamics of why this is true is what will ultimately destroy the idea. This brings us to the next stage, which is devolution. Most of the time, the idea or message or theme is complex, but even if it isn't, its original form is representative of the zeitgeist from which it was born, and that's always complex. For a political movement, you have to look at the social, cultural, and legal backdrop of why that political movement was created in the first place. For instance, women's suffrage that gave birth to feminism. For a religion, the same factors apply. For example, the more you separate Jesus of Nazareth from the brutal Roman occupation that he and his people faced in the first century, the more otherworldly the religion that would ultimately be named after him would become. But with the widespread adoption of the masses, the original ideas get hijacked. Ideas get distilled down to their most impactful and easy to understand form. And once it becomes accessible, that's when the idea catches fire and grows. And that makes sense, doesn't it? The reason that the idea originally spoke to the fringe is most likely because it served a purpose for that specific minority. It fulfilled a need for that small group. Christianity spoke to the poor and oppressed under the Romans. The civil rights movement of the United States did the exact same thing for descendants of African slaves in the US. Geeky entertainment, by definition, is niche. But when that idea or liturgy or theme or motive changes to include more people, the new accessibility inspires expansion. The irony of this phenomenon, of course, is that by the time an idea speaks to the masses, it's usually unrecognizable when compared to its original form. After that, the most incredible thing tends to happen in this devolution stage. When an idea gains widespread popularity, the followers always contain a minority of people who understand what the original idea was, or at least claim to.
It doesn't help matters when primetime TV has Murphy Brown, a character who supposedly epitomizes today's intelligent, highly paid professional woman, mocking the importance of fathers by bearing a child alone and calling it just another lifestyle choice.
And at the beginning of the mass popularity of the idea, those people typically face a choice. Do they correct the masses who have incorrectly interpreted the idea, or do they enjoy the newly found popularity of a version of that idea? Most of the time, in fact almost all the time, they choose the latter. The reasons are twofold. First, the originators or early adopters enjoy the validation that they feel when they see a version of their idea take hold. Kind of like when your favorite band or movie catches on.
Oh, wait, hang on. What if Thor's hand is on the hammer? I mean, if he's touching it with his god magic, does that mean I could lift it?
No.
Yes.
Picked up Thor while Thor is holding the hammer.
Yeah.
Then by the transitive property of picking things up, actually arguing about comic books?
No, that can't be right. Maybe Thor's hammer is the new color of nail polish.
Second, and more sinister, often there's a profit motive that inspires the originators to use the idea for gain, even at the expense of the idea. Ultimately, that leads to the predictable next stage for the idea, and that is death. I define the death of an idea as the point where it has evolved so much that it's not just unrecognizable from its original form, the idea can't even fulfill its original practical purpose for that first minority. At this stage, the idea doesn't even do what it originally set out to do. Maybe your organization was chartered to advance the cause of colored people in the United States, but it doesn't do that anymore. Maybe your church was supposed to represent the deity you worship here on earth, not just in love, but in discipline and obedience. But it doesn't do that anymore. Maybe your artistic movement produced music that really represented your culture or told people how it really was on the streets. But it doesn't do that anymore. Maybe your political movement was supposed to make life easier for women. But it doesn't do that anymore. Maybe your intellectual property was designed to provide entertainment for socially awkward, smarter than average people. But it does not do that anymore. And then finally, there's the restoration stage. I should probably put restoration in quotes because it's kind of a misnomer. A weird phenomenon happens during the restoration phase. I think you'll recognize it. See, during the restoration stage, a small band, again, a minority group, recognizes that the idea has been killed and they wish to restore it. These people tend to deify the originator, and that person becomes a messiah of sorts. Along with that, the individuals historically credited with moving the original idea forward, they become the idea's champions or prophets, so to speak. And of course, the individuals associated with changing the idea become heretics. You know, some of history's favorite punching bags. And most importantly, and really the entire point of this video, the idea never really recovers. Its final form is the recorded version of what the simple masses understand or think they understand the idea to be. I'm Odium. This has been Message in a Bottle. Come back for the next reflection.
All the born beliefs of the mind. But what's real or what's right has so little to do with those minds.